Tonight I'm going to be making a meal that in Indian is called Mujardara, and in Armenian it is called Mujardara. The Armenian version is a lot more wet and a lot less appealing to me personally, even though I am part Armenian. So I prefer to make the Indian version. I start with coconut oil. You could use olive oil or another oil, but keep in mind we're going to be caramelizing onion, and coconut oil has a very high smoking temperature, which means that you can have it on a fairly high heat for a long period of time and it's not going to affect the flavor. Of course, the type of coconut oil that I use does not have the flavor of the coconut. It's a very bland, flavorless oil. I'm cooking for a family of 6 and hoping to get leftovers, so this might look like a lot, but it's going to spread. I'm going to start at high heat just to get the coconut oil melted. Coconut oil is solid. If the temperature is lower than, I don't know, 72 degrees, somewhere in the 70s. Here I have 3 sweet onions. They were kind of smaller. And I'm not saying anything about measurements because the truth is you do not need measurements for this meal. That is how simple this meal is. That's a lot of onion, but one of the main flavors in this meal is actually the caramelized onion, which because of the coconut oil, the sweetness is amazing. Unless you're a sugar fiend, you're going to appreciate just how sweet this onion makes the Mujardara. I'll tell you what, 3 onions is a world of hurt to my eyes. I'm going to be putting the lid on soon so I don't have to deal with the fresh fumes. And I don't want all of my oil to actually come from the coconut oil. I just want enough coconut oil to coat the onions to brown them. Add some salt across your onions. So we have the onion going, and the only other ingredients aside from the salt is cumin, lentils. I don't think it actually matters what type of lentils. This is just a basic, I guess, brown lentil from the store. And brown rice. Whole grains, extremely healthy, low in fat, an awesome source of protein. So I'm going to wash up my lentils and wash up my brown rice and get those started cooking. I start them separately. I start with the lentils because the lentils will cook longer than the rice will. But when the lentils have gone a while, I will put the rice in to cook with the lentils. It's just a question of then watching the level of moisture that you have, making sure that you get it the texture that you want. If you want it firmer, you don't want to add as much water. You don't want to cook it as long. I tend to like it a little bit pastier, so I'm going to be cooking mine a good long time. When you put the lentils and the rice in together, then you just add a little bit of salt to enhance the flavor, just a little bit, and cumin. So, here we go. I have my lentils on, ready to cook. A little bit of a husk there. In a little while, once the water is close to boiling, I will add my rice. It's a good idea to stir the onions. They are on medium now. And I keep a lid on the onions. Obviously I didn't take good enough care of them, but I keep a lid on the onions because I want the heat coming from the top as well as the bottom. Those are starting to look good. So I'll just turn down the temperature a little bit more on the onions. I definitely do not want to burn them. Down to medium-low. The question is how much cumin should you add? And for me personally, I like to add in as much cumin as it takes to see color, and so that I smell it as it's cooking. So depending on the size of the meal you're making, again, cooking for a family of 6 here, you're going to be using at least a tablespoon. So right now I can see the color of the cumin. This is close to boiling, so I'm going to add the rice, which has been thoroughly washed. And personally, I like about a 50-50 ratio between the rice and the lentils. Once this starts to boil, I'm going to cook it essentially like I would cook rice. Because I'm using brown rice, my cook time should be about 40 minutes. I'm going to put a lid on and let it simmer once it reaches a boil. Onions now are continuing to caramelize. They're reaching a nice brown color. I actually like them to have a deeper color because that's when the sweetness really starts to come out. And when both of these pots are ready, I will be adding olive oil to help spread the flavor, and all of the onions and the oil will come into the lentils and the rice. We'll mix them up and the flavor will be spread. So the onions are a nice brown. You can actually go a little bit darker than that. The lentils and the rice are actually softened, they're cooked, but I want them to go a little bit softer. And once this is done, we're going to be ready to serve it up. The amount of water, you want to make sure that when you start cooking the lentils and the rice that they're covered with water, maybe a little bit extra water, just depending. And the water's just about gone, so it's looking good for dinner. Alright, so now I'm ready to add a little bit of olive oil just to help spread the flavor. If you are short on the oil, you're going to be short on the flavor. It's also good to remember that natural, healthy oils actually help the human body absorb nutrients. You'll notice that this is a little bit pasty. I'm just going to add a touch of salt. There's the intense flavor of the caramelized onion that the coconut oil is carrying. And because I've put the olive oil in toward the end and I'm just warming it up to infuse the flavor, I also get a bit of the brightness of the olive oil to add to the cumin flavor of the lentils and rice. Now we just combine. I do want to get all of that in there. Now it's just a question of mixing thoroughly. To garnish Mujardara, you want fresh cucumber, fresh tomato, and yogurt. Yogurt is optional, but you do want one of the fresh ingredients, either the fresh cucumber or the fresh tomato at least. Test it for flavor, see if you need to add any salt, add any cumin. It's great to serve up with a side of naan. If you want to know how to make naan at home, I have a recipe for that. Just check my channel. This is the Mujardara. Top it with fresh yogurt, cucumbers, and tomatoes. You mix it up, and back in the day before people used forks, they used bread. If you have never had fresh Mujardara, you have no idea what you are missing. This is one tasty bite.